Thank you, and very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's very nice to be back here in person. Exploration is to mining what R&D is to the pharmaceutical industry. It drives growth and secures sustainability. To succeed, exploration requires a carefully considered long-term strategy and the substantial investment in time, skills, and money required to implement it. It's a process, sometimes a long one, but it creates real value, unlike most mergers and acquisitions, which shuffle existing assets without increasing global production. And that's a real problem, getting worse by the day. As I'll show you, using gold and copper as examples, and I'll touch on the other metals as well, on current projections, production is destined to decline across the mining industry. When it comes to a critical metal such as copper, this means that producers will fall far short of supplying the rapidly accelerating demand generated by intense worldwide focus on the transition to clean energy. Miners will need to find the resources to meet this challenge, and that's going to require a strong new emphasis on exploration. And that can be said for most critical metals, not only those required for batteries, but also those required for infrastructure and growth of the underdeveloped countries as part of ensuring a sustainable world. Just in case I do say something forward-looking, I point you to the cautionary statement, and for those who want to study it further, it is on our website. When it comes to challenges, mining already has more than its share at the best of times, as you can see on the conventional ranking of risks and opportunities on this slide. What this does not show is the threat presented by the growing gap between supply and demand, which in my view requires at least as much attention as we give ESG, or perhaps more. Absent major developments, the copper market is forecast to be in a 4.7 million ton deficit by 2030. And it is estimated that an investment of almost $100 billion will be required to bridge this gap. If you add cobalt, nickel, and lithium, the investment soars to $1.7 trillion. Given these large numbers and long lead times, mining companies need to take an urgent look at ways of building their resources, both with respect to human resources and project inventory. It also begs the question why we have not advocated for more investment in responsible mining. Another certainty is that mining companies and investors will have to venture out of their traditional comfort zones, where the potential for new world-class discoveries has long been exhausted. And this is where they need to go. Some of the most prospective targets can appear daunting because they are in remote and undeveloped parts of the world. But as we heard from the latest gathering at COP27, these are parts of the world that needs investment and development. Therefore, our belief of a just transition is to promote the responsible investment and upliftment in developing and underdeveloped countries, and we should be encouraging mining and exploration companies to invest in these destinations. As Barrick has shown, it is possible to build and operate world-class mines in the heart of Africa, if you do it right. And that is what this world needs to ensure, to be able to build a sustainable future for all. And what that means, partnering with your host countries and sharing the economic benefits your operations generate fairly with them. This slide shows the percentage of the returns that go to the state from large gold operations in some of the major mining jurisdictions around the world. But responsible mining means more than simply paying your taxes. It also requires you to earn your social license to operate by uplifting the economies of one's host countries and improving the quality of life in neighboring communities. Investing in local service providers, contractors, healthcare, and education, expanding the infrastructure, and creating employment and economic opportunities. Barrick overcame the lack of appropriate skills in its African host countries by investing in the development of their human capital. And today it mines in Mali and the Democratic Republic of Congo, among the largest in the world, are managed and operated entirely by local nationals. There's an important lesson here for companies entering new countries. You'll be welcome there if your business, which is what they are, arguably even more important than shareholders. And that's really important, and that is for us to recognize, and I always say that to our shareholders. The most important stakeholder in our business is our host country. Because if you lose out in your mine, everyone loses. And so the importance of a strong license to operate is absolutely critical. Exploration is not just about primary discoveries. It also means making the most of what you already have. While Barrick hunts worldwide for its next Tier 1 mines, it optimizes the value of its existing operations and projects through continuing brownfields exploration. Year after year, Barrick's focus is on replacing the reserves depleted by mining, and it's this brownfields exploration that supports a robust 10-year rolling production profile. The looming supply shortage of critical metals is going to require the enormous capital investment in exploration and development I noted at the start of this presentation. Where is that money going to come from is the question. The market's capital allocation pool appears to have been largely captured, and the shrinking number of specialist mining investors does not augur well for the sector's prospects and may affect its own appetite for risk. I think there's a strong case for the governments of the wealthy countries to incentivize this investment through models such as Canada's flow-through equity program, and even to establish critical metal partnerships with key producers. How's a reminder of the need for that investment? Copper is probably the most important of critical metals. Production is expected to increase in the near term, but without significant new resources, the supply is expected to fall far short of the demand, being driven by just global electrification over the next 15 years, let alone the need to develop the underdeveloped countries' infrastructure and economies. Same goes for most other metals, whether they are so-called critical battery metals or those that are required for the development of a just global village. Gold production, without a significant increase in price or some major new discoveries, is also destined to decline, as I will show you just now. I would also point out that I think we've really started getting our head around what this world needs to be a world that is capable to support future generations. And that is, we have to uplift the rest of humankind. And to do that, you have to do development. And to do development, you need mining. So, how are we doing on the gold project discovery front? And again, I would point out this is really applicable for most metals. Not too well, as you can see here. We haven't had really any big discoveries for a while. And if you look at the total discoveries during the 90s, it was 180 new discoveries, but just 44 during the 2010s. And here is why. The major gold producers have consistently underinvested in exploration, and in the event are reluctant to enter what they regard as risky jurisdictions, which, as I pointed out earlier, is where there is a high potential for world-class discoveries. Instead, they cling to their traditional and by now thoroughly mature grounds, apparently in the hope that if you've found gold there once, they'll find it again. This means that greenfields exploration has been left largely to the juniors, who, given what I explained earlier, are finding it more and more difficult to attract funding. And the same is true to an even more worrying extent of copper, where the discovery rate has dropped sharply as well. Like gold miners, the copper industry has also underinvested in exploration and is equally averse to risk, preferring to stick to the largely mature western seaboard of Latin America and focusing on near-mine exploration. And I think it's important, if you look at the western seaboard of South America, both at their geopolitical risk recently and also the exploration risk in the Andes. There's a lot of better places to go hunting world-class copper deposits. And in fact, Barrick has gone to Pakistan, which is part of the Tethyan metalliferous belt, where it plans to develop the massive Reko Diq deposit in partnership with that government. And I think that is the new Andes, that whole metalliferous belt. On a positive note, however, the tools of the explorer's trade have been transformed by new technologies. The use of airborne and satellite platforms, for example, has enabled Barrick to collect vast amounts of data from the millions of hectares covered by the prospective properties in our portfolio. Increasingly powerful computers enable the manipulation, analysis, and visualization of mineral systems. These technical advances have driven discovery trends in recent years, with the result that the easily accessible near-surface search space is very mature for large discoveries, meaning that as explorers, we need to go to new places and think differently. And we certainly have used this technology very effectively in the new work that we're doing on the Tethyan trend. Critical, and I think the last time I spoke here, I highlighted this as well. Sophisticated tools need highly capable people to use them and then drive the on-the-ground exploration activities. And unfortunately, the industry is faced with a growing skills shortage as it struggles to attract suitably qualified young people to replace its aging workforce. That's why Barrick invests as much in developing its human capital as it does in exploration. To find and operate the best assets, you have to recruit and train the very best people. But you also have to create an environment that will attract a new generation of graduates with new values and priorities. To that end, Barrick is building a forward-facing business for its future leaders, one that is aligned to the expectations of a rapidly changing world, and where geologists, engineers, and metallurgists, as well as financial and sustainability executives, work together as a team with a common purpose for good. Ultimately, it's discovery and development that create real value, which is why the mining industry urgently needs to sharpen its focus on exploration, increase its long-term commitment to this all-important function, and take the bold capital decisions to invest in those high-potential domains where the big discoveries are waiting to be made. By supporting the social and economic development of these countries through responsible and sustainable mining, the industry will also be going some way towards improving a reputation that, frankly, is in need of some work, and in so doing, participating in a transition to a more sustainable world. Thank you very much for your attention. And I think I've got 3 minutes, Annie.
We've got time for 1 or 2 questions. Who would like to ask a question to Mark? Okay, if you can just give your name and the name of your firm, please, sir.
David Hutchins, Taurus Investments. Could you just give me an idea of your dealings with the Pakistan government? How would you relate them with other governments you've dealt with in the past, bearing in mind a lot of the African governments you've dealt with?
So very engaging, and I use this quite often now. So imagine you're in the United States. You end up in arbitration and you win it. We get an award, $5 billion. And after a lot of toing and froing, we all agree I reach out and say, let's stop fighting and let's find a way to develop this asset together, which everyone agrees. So we create a framework agreement. We negotiate 2 years, a framework agreement, which is going to take this project to fruition with Mr. Khan's government in Pakistan. There's a change in government. Now we're dealing with Mr. Sharif's government. And he takes the framework agreement and converts it into a full agreement. All the agreements related to that framework agreement, without once changing the thesis of the framework agreement. And then the president of the country refers all the agreements to the Supreme Court of Pakistan to reference whether we've done it right, whether it's constitutionally correct, legally correct, etc. And the Supreme Court appointed a 5-person bench, which have the last 3 weeks been evaluating this and taking questions, and the various legal professions have had to stand up and defend what we've done and answer the questions. And all those agreements were made fully public. And in fact, the Supreme Court completed its hearings yesterday. So I take that point, and I would add too that the people leading the negotiations from the Attorney General's office were the same in both governments. And we've dealt with we've also dealt with 2 governments in the Balochistan province as well. So imagine me negotiating a framework agreement with the Republican Party in the United States, and then trusting that the Democratic Party would actually implement what the Republicans have agreed with me to the letter. It would never happen. And so we walk around, and Barrick's got big investments, its biggest investments in the United States. I spend as much time on politics and engagement in Nevada and Washington as I do in Kinshasa and Kibale in the DRC. Because this world's changed. And that's the point I make, is that, us as miners and as explorers, we are pioneers by nature. We also, this world, if we're going to fix it, we can't fix it by pontificating here in the United Kingdom and Washington about what you can't do and can do when it comes to the environment. Because the world is one world. And what we've got to do is uplift the people out of poverty, because that is the biggest single risk. And as you know, business is always better than governments. If you've heard the President of the United States and many other important politicians in COP27 about how they're going to help out the disadvantaged countries. But we know that neither them nor the global institutions are capable of implementing real upliftment. But the industry can, and certainly the mining industry does. And so for me, and I've always said, and we all should take note of this, in my experience over the last 30 plus years, we've never been able to not deliver what we wanted to. We've had our little challenges. And the fact lies in, we as miners should always invest in profitable businesses, because the old adage, the landlord never kicks out the tenant who pays the rent. And we have to pay rent. And I think as the world is woken up to natural resources, that rent has to include a broader base than just paying tax, and that is to embrace and develop local people. And I'd finish on this. Everyone's talking about inflation and employment costs, particularly in the US. But that's because we as an industry chase an ever-decreasing pool of aging miners. And when I say that, I mean not only mining engineers, but everybody in mining. And what we've done is we've forgotten about that, because we grew up in Barrick Gold in Africa, where there is no mining experience. And we demonstrated to ourselves, if you invest in young people, smart young people, in the countries in which you operate, you can uplift people. We've just appointed the first general manager in Kibale in DRC, started as a student with us just over 10 years ago. Smart people get places quickly. And what our industry needs to do is go out there and invest in young people. And I'm absolutely convinced that we'll be accepted by future generations if we do that.
Thank you very much for an excellent keynote presentation from Mark Bristow, CEO of Barrick. Thank you.